They don't get it. They just don't get it. And because they don't get it, deacons at Woke United Methodist have wasted the last 5 months blaming everyone else for their problems. Instead of looking in the woke mirror, which gives men aspiring to be women the reflection that they're actually a woman, instead of looking in the mirror and realizing that they are the problem. And when I say blaming everyone else, what I really mean to say is the deacons, they are blaming the white man for America rejecting the woke fungus. Because as you guys know, anytime there is a problem in the utopian world of Wiener, it's always the white man's fault. Even though I am prone to making them myself, I cannot stand excuses. I don't like blaming others for my problems because when things aren't going my way, in the vast majority of those cases, I am the problem. For years, I blamed my former employer for the fact that I was miserable. I didn't like following their rules, and God knows they had plenty of rules. The employee handbook was hundreds of pages filled with what they called standard operating procedure. When you're miserable at work, that misery has a tendency to infect every aspect of your life. We spend most of our time at work, so it stands to reason that if you hate your job, you're not going to be very happy with your life. After years of making excuses, after years of blaming them, I finally figured out that it wasn't them, it was me. I was miserable at work because I didn't want to be there. So I quit my job to pursue YouTube full time, and I was no longer miserable. Now, of course, YouTube doesn't come without its own set of challenges. Over the past few weeks, I've been in a slump, really since the beginning of March. I was blaming the algorithm changes. I was blaming the volatility in the economy. Finally, this morning, I had to check myself and realize that maybe it's just me. Maybe I'm picking the wrong topics. Maybe I need to focus more on Tran Dan trying to become an All-American in women's billiards. When you think about it, billiards really is the perfect sport for Dan. It gives him the opportunity to play with the big stick. But all kidding aside, I don't know what's causing the volatility lately with views on YouTube. My analytics tell me I'm doing well, but my views are kind of flatlined. After spending the last few weeks looking for excuses, I mentally slapped the shit out of myself this morning and I told myself, Kyle, when I'm talking to myself, I call myself Kyle to avoid any confusion. But I said, Kyle, quit making excuses and focus on the things you can control. Unfortunately, I cannot say the same for the Democrats who are desperate to get back into leadership positions. I damn sure can't say the same for professors at Woke U who are actively indoctrinating college kids. Eddie Glaude, or as his indoctrinated pupils prefer to call him, Professor Doofus. Eddie Glaude is a professor at Princeton. Supposedly, Edward is a religious scholar, but from what I can tell, his primary focus is the religion of mythical racism. Earlier this week, Ed was a guest on something called Deadline on MSNBC, which I guess is an appropriate name for a show on a network that is clinging to life support. This polished turd, it is hosted by Nicole Wallace, who I'm surprised still has a job. This is the same Nicole Wallace who politicized DJ Daniel last month after the Trumper made him an honorary member of the Secret Service. Maybe in the last few weeks, MSNBC has made it mandatory for Nicole Wallace to attend daily sessions of sensitivity training because she seemed uncomfortable sharing a set with Professor Doofus as he accused 78 million Americans of not voting for cackling Cam Harris because she was a black woman. Make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow me on Twitter at KC_BTL84. Link to the second channel is in the description below. This morning on the second channel, talked about the dominant ratings in March Madness and how college basketball has briefly overshadowed the NBA. We also talked about the lack of excitement going into the NBA playoffs. So if you haven't already, click the link in the description below. Subscribe to the second channel. For reasons unknown, MSNBC is still bitching about Cam Harris losing the election. I guess they don't go through the stages of grief and sensitivity training. Matter of fact, the Democrats seem to be stuck between the first and the second phases, which are denial and anger. The sensitivity trainers, they're going to have a hell of a time getting them out of the anger stage since, Democrats and their supporters, they seem to live in a constant state of anger. Maybe they should call social worker Shanice. I hear she has gained a lot of experience over the last few years dealing with angry criminals since the police have been defunded. Anyway, here we are in April, and MSNBC is still whining about cackling Cam losing the election. They're still investigating why Cam Harris lost. And by investigating, I mean they're still making excuses and blaming everyone else. Nicole Wallace invited Eddie on her show to help her dwindling audience cope with this devastating loss. She wanted Professor Doofus to give her audience someone to blame for this grave injustice. Since Professor Ed is an expert in the field of mythical racism, he knew the perfect demographic to blame. White people. Now, I want you to pay very close attention to Nicole Wallace. I know this might be difficult because the Botox prevents her face from making expressions, but it appears to me that Nicole Wallace is uncomfortable with Professor Doofus accusing 78 million people of not electing Cam Harris because of her race. Watch for yourself.
To grapple with it. Because it's the snake, it's the beast coiled up in the heart, the bosom of the country, as Frederick Douglass said.
Say more.
We chose a felon who is more interested in loyalty, who's more interested in retribution, who's more interested in grift than in democracy. And we chose a felon because we didn't want to elect a black woman. So to read that, to actually explicate that, is to say we would rather destroy the republic than for that to have happened.
First of all, credit to Nicole Wallace. She noticed that Eddie Glaude was making a complete fool of himself, and she told him to say more. That is a veteran broadcaster. When you have someone humiliating themselves on live television, you don't do like the Yentas on The View and interrupt them. You copy the strategy of the American hero Scott Jennings. I am a real American. You copy the strategy of Scott Jennings and you let them confirm their stupidity. Was it just me, or did Edward accuse us of being bosoms? Who in the hell talks like that? In the year of our Lord 2025, who is using the word bosom? Better yet, why are woke men so emotional? Why does it seem like Democratic dudes are always on the verge of tears? Believe it or not, this is not the first time that Edward has had an emotional breakdown on MSNBC. Back in October, they damn near had to call the psychiatrist because the symptoms of OMB are bad. The symptoms of OMB were so severe, Professor Ed was having convulsions. Luckily, Claire McCaskill was there to give him a shoulder to cry on. Watch for yourself.
And this man is running around here busting his chops, scaring the hell out of communities, right? And we're trying to figure out how to keep that middle, locked in on her when she needs to bust him in his mouth. I'm saying it like that because he's dangerous. He's dangerous to particular people. We got to come out and try to figure out how to turn out in large historic numbers, because we got to keep this troglodyte out of office. Because if he comes in, our babies are going to be in danger. Because remember, those young children are going to grow up with the memory of having to not go to school for the threat of bombs. And somebody told them that their moms and dads eat cats, they eat cats and dogs. I'll get myself together, Claire.
Okay, take a minute. Deep breath.
Is it any wonder why men are disgusted with the Democratic Party? My dad is 74 years old. You know how many times I have seen my dad cry over a president? None. If I cried over a president, my dad would be pulling off his belt. And if I cried over a president on camera, my dad wouldn't have to pull off his belt because I would whoop my own ass. Professor Ed is almost 60 years old, and he's crying on national television over the Trumper. Of course, he tries to frame his emotional state as being concerned about the children. Oh, the children! I'm so concerned about the children! What children? Edward doesn't have any young children. His son is an adult who graduated from Brown University, so what child is he so concerned about? Ladies and gentlemen, this is who is educating your kids. For years now, I have been referring to universities as woke you. Here is your proof. Kids are no longer being educated, they're being indoctrinated. At the elementary and high school level, kids are no longer learning math and science. White kids are learning about their inherent racism, and minority kids, they are being taught to be the victim. When kindergartners learn the alphabet, their non-binary teacher sings LGBTQIA plus @ let's hold hands and be gay. If you don't believe me, just look at what is happening at Harvard. Harvard is supposed to be the best of the best, right? Harvard is supposed to accept and mold the most intelligent students in the country. Right now, there are students at Harvard taking remedial math courses. Why? Because they lack the foundational skills to take college-level courses. Translation, I guess they can't add and subtract, but that's okay. That's okay. I'm sure they are experts when it comes to counting the 72 genders. If they're taking remedial math courses, how did they get into Harvard? According to the New York Post, the scaling back of standardized testing allowed them to slip through. Without SAT or ACT scores to judge their knowledge, I guess Harvard had no way of knowing. My question is, who got rid of standardized testing? Who decided that students would be accepted without SAT scores? I wonder if that had anything to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. I know Democrats and their pretend friends in the mainstream media are wondering why cackling Cam Harris lost the election. I know they're investigating. I know they're probably spending millions of dollars trying to formulate an excuse. But to hell with an excuse. Allow Uncle KC to give you a reason. One of the reasons Cam Harris lost, it's because you have men like Eddie Glaude crying on a woman's shoulder. Give me your thoughts on this. An MSNBC guest accuses 78 million Americans of not voting for Cam Harris because she's a black woman. I thought Nicole Wallace seemed kind of uncomfortable during that segment. What about you? Also, are emotional woke men one of the reasons that Cam Harris lost? Let me know. Sound off in the comments below. I'll see you guys tomorrow.